Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Griffin with the Unit 2 Lesson 4 video where we're going to be talking about how to take a segment and divide it up into equal parts, not just half, but into a certain ratio. So when we look at number 1, I've plotted the 2 points they've talked about, and it says that we're going to find a point that divides this directed line segment, which goes from -5,3 to 10, -2 into a 1:4 ratio. Let's start first by talking about what a directed line segment is. It means that they're telling you we have to start at -5,3 and graph towards 10, -2. And that this point here is going, or this direction is going to matter. So we kind of need to pay attention and always start at the point that it's saying we're going from. So that's what a directed line segment is. The second thing we need to pay attention to is this ratio. We're going to divide that segment into a 1:4 ratio. That means we need to create it so that we have one section to one side of a special point, and then we have 4 on the other. So we have a 1:4 ratio. Basically, we're going to take this whole thing and divide it into 5 equal parts, 5 congruent pieces. So if we're doing this on the graph, we're counting like slope. We have to see how far we rise and run to go from -5,3 to 10, -2. And so if we look at our slope, to get from one to the other, we have to go down 5 and right 15. We're going to divide that up into 5s because we want to divide these into 5 congruent or equal pieces. So we're going to take each of those counts and divide. And so we're going to go down 1 and right 3. So from our starting point of -5,3, we're going to go down 1 and right 3. Down 1 and right 3. Down 1 and right 3. And continue to do that until we end up on the 10, -2. And then you can see that we were trying to divide it into a 1:4 ratio. So we have one piece on one side and 4 pieces on the other side of this point, which is -2, 2. Okay. We can also do this by a table. So it says we're going to find a point on the directed line segment from A to C that divides the segment into a 1:7 ratio. So if we draw that in, a 1:7 ratio means we're going to have this point, and on one side, if I'm going to go up and down, there's going to be one section, and on the other part, there's going to be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what we're going to have is we're going to have 8 different pieces because there's 1 here and 7 here. So for a total of 8, we need to divide this segment into 8 equal pieces. Each of these points, of these 8 points, is going to be represented by a part of our table. So I'm going to just scooch this next to our table here so that each point is represented by a row on the table. Okay, so our first point is going to be point A, because it's a directed line segment, which is -6,3. And our final point, which is missing a row here, is going to be point C, which is -8, -5. Each of these other points goes straight to one of these rows in the table. Okay, so what we need to do is figure out how much change has occurred. And if you looked at our graph, that's what we did. We figured out how much we went down and over. We need to do the same thing for our x's and y's here. So to get from -6 to -8, we have to figure out what the change is, what has occurred. And in order to get from -6 to -8, that's our change in x values, we have to subtract 2. Now, if you're not sure, you can always do x2 minus x1. -8 minus -6 is -2, and that's where that number comes from. Or you can just calculate it. To get from -6 to -8, we have to subtract 2. We're going to take that, and if you remember I said we had to divide this into 8 equal pieces, we're going to divide that by 8. -2 divided by 8 is -0.25. So if we're dividing dividing it into 8 pieces, that means that to get from one to the other, we're going to subtract 0.25 each time. So -6 minus 0.25 is -6.25. Adding another negative 0.25 is negative 6.5, negative 6.75, negative 7, 7.25, etc. And you can see that we would land on negative 8 when we were done. And we're going to do the same thing for our y values. So to get from 3 to negative 5, our change in y, we would have to subtract 8. If you're not sure, you can always do y2 minus y1 and see you get your negative 8. Okay, and we're going to divide it into the 8 pieces again, meaning we'd have to subtract 1 to get from each part of the table to the next line. So 3 minus 1 is 2, minus another 1 is 1, minus 1 again, and continue to subtract 1 until you see we land on negative 5. Now remember that we wanted the point to be 1 segment on one side of it and 7 on the other. This point here has 1 segment on one side of it and 7 segments on the other. Not points, segments. That point is our final answer here. So the point is negative 6.252. All right, we're going to do the rest of these like a table. If you prefer to graph them, go ahead, but I know it didn't copy clearly. So if you look at this, we're going to go from AB is going to be 5 segments, and BC is going to be 3 segments. So from A to B, we have 5 segments. So here's point A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments between A and B. And then from B to C, there's 3 more. 1, 2, 3 from B to C. So a total of 8 segments. We're going to divide this into 8 parts. We're now going to make a table. Each point is going to get its own row in the table. So point A was at 0, 10, and point C was at 8, negative 10, and we're going to divide it up into 8 parts. So if you look at your x values, to get from 0 to 8, we have to add 8. Changing the x, we add 8. And again, if you're not sure, x2 minus x1. We're dividing it into 8 parts, which means that we are going to add 1 each time. So 0 plus 1 is 1, 2, and continue adding 1, and you will see you get to 8. Next, from 10 to negative 10, we are subtracting 20 for our change in y, and we're dividing that into 8 pieces. Now here's why the table is better than the graph, because negative 20 divided by 8 is negative 2.5. I personally find it easier to add negative 2.5 down a table than to try to count down 2.5 boxes. So if you're going on the table, 10 minus 2.5 is 7.5. Minus 2.5 again is 5. Continue subtracting 2.5, and you will see that you get to negative 10 like you're supposed to. And then again, remember, we wanted point B. Point B was here, which is the point that divided it so that there was 5 segments to one side and 3 to the other. So point B is our final answer, and it is 5, negative 2.5. Number 4, same idea. AB to BC is 2 to 3. So from AB we have 2 units. And then from B to C there are 3. 1, 2, 3. Each one of these is going to get a row on the table, each point. Okay, and remember, if there's 2 segments here and 3 segments here, that's a total of 5 segments we have to divide this into. So if A is at 2, negative 7, and C is at 7, 3, we're going to figure out our change in x first. So to get from 2 to 7, we have to add 5. Dividing that into 5 pieces means we should add 1 for each line. So 3, 4, 5, 6. For your y values, to get from negative 7 to 3, if you're not sure, y2 minus y1, you can see that we're adding 10. We're going to divide that into 5 pieces and really add 2 for each row. So negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. And you can see that you land at 7, 3 like you're supposed to. And then finally, point B is 4, negative 3. Always make sure you write it as a coordinate point for the final answer. Number 5 is similar, but the setup is a little different in the wording. It says that we have A and C, and we're finding point B on AC such that AB is 1/3 of AC. That means A to B is 1 unit, and B to C, or A to C, is 3 total. So A to B is 1 out of 3 total. That phrasing is a little different because that means that we really only have 3 segments. We're dividing it into 3 parts. And then just like the other ones, each point gets a row on the table. A is 8, 1, C is negative 7, 7, and we calculate the change. To get from 8 to negative 7, if you're not sure, subtract x2 minus x1 is negative 15. We're dividing this into 3 parts, so we're going to subtract 5 each time. 8 minus 5 is 3, minus 5 is negative 2, minus another 5 is negative 7. If you don't land where you're supposed to, you'll know that you did something wrong. For our change in y values, to get from 1 to 7, we have to add 6, divide that into the 3 parts, and add 2 for each row. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2, etc. And then our final answer is point B, 3, 3. Number 6, AB to AC is 2 to 3. So A to B has 2 segments, and then A to C has 3. So we already have 2 of them. We just need 1 more so that AC will be a total of 3. And since there's a total of 3, we're dividing it into 3 pieces. And just like the other ones, each point gets its own row. So A is negative 8, negative 10. C is 4, 8. The change in y, or x rather, would be from negative 8 to 4, we would have to add 12. And we're dividing it into 3 parts, so we're going to add 4 each time. So negative 8 plus 4, and then plus 4, and then plus 4 again. Same thing for our y values. To get from negative 10 to 8, we have to add 18. Divide that into the 3 parts. And C will add 6 each time. So adding 6 gets you negative 4, 2, and 8. And then the final answer was point B, which is at 0, 2. Okay. For number 7, point P is on the line segment HB, so that A to P is 3 times P to B. So from A to P is equal to 3 times what P to B is. A to P is 3 times bigger than P to B. That means I have a total of 4 segments to divide this into. Each point's going to get its own row on the table. A is at 3, negative 4, and B is at negative 5, 2. When it says A and B respectively, it just means in the same order. They said A first, so this is A. They said B second, so this is B. So to get from 3 to negative 5, we have to subtract 8. We're dividing by 4, meaning we'll subtract 2 for each row. So subtract 2, subtract 2, subtract 2. To get from 4 to 2, we have to add 6. We're dividing that by 4, which means that we have to add 1.5 to each row. So when you do negative 4 plus 1.5, you get negative 2.5, plus another 1.5 is negative 1.5, and then 2. And then point P is at negative 3.5, or 0.5. Okay, number 8. It says we have given F and G. Point S lies 1/4 of the way along FG closer to F than G. It's 1 out of 4. That means there's 1 segment from point F to S because it's closer to F, and then 4 is the total because it's 1 out of a total of 4 segments. So we're dividing by 4. Same thing as before. Each point is going to get a row on the table. F is 0, 2. G is 2, 6. If we're going from 0 to 2, we have to add 2. We're dividing that by 4, meaning we have to add 0.5 to each row. Okay, to get from 2 to 6, we would have to add 4. Again, we're dividing that by 4 and adding 1 for each line. So 2 plus 1 is 3, 4, 5, and 6. And therefore, point S is at 0.5, 3. We will finish the rest in class.